Some love stories are not meant to last, they are meant to awaken. When an empath falls in love with a narcissist, they do not step into a romance, they step into a ritual of rupture. At first, they believe they've met the right person, a rare soul who listens, who cares, who touches the deepest parts of them that no one else ever has. Everything seems to align perfectly, almost as if the universe itself conspired for this meeting. But soon what once felt right begins to dissolve into confusion. Attention becomes a weapon. Love turns into a test. And the very eyes that once made them believe in goodness become mirrors, reflecting their deepest fears of being abandoned, replaced, or not enough. The empath doesn't realize that they've fallen in love with an illusion, the illusion of the part of themselves they've always tried to rescue in others, and the illusion of someone who never intended to be real. When Carl Jung said that every significant encounter is the soul's destiny, he wasn't speaking of romantic hand-holding, but of collisions that force us to face our own darkness. To love a narcissist is to stare into a mirror. You don't just see them, you see the fragile parts of yourself that were willing to endure pain just to feel loved. That love was not wrong, it was simply meant to teach you that loving someone can never replace learning to love yourself. So when they betray you, go silent, or disappear, what truly shatters is not your faith in others, but the illusion that love must come with suffering to be real. And in that very moment, amid pain that feels unbearable, the empath begins to awaken. They realize they were never destroyed, only reborn. That pain was never punishment, but the doorway, opening back to their true self, a place where love is no longer a plea, but the quiet presence of a soul that finally knows its own worth. Part 1. The Illusion of Love. When an empath meets a narcissist, something in the air shifts. No words are needed, just a glance. An unconscious recognition takes place. An electric current runs through the soul, as if two spirits had known each other in a lifetime long past. The empath feels that intensity, that inexplicable depth of connection. They believe they've met someone extraordinary, someone who can truly see them, understand them, and finally make them feel safe. But that safety is not real. It is the safety of an illusion carefully crafted from the narcissist's hunger for admiration, control, and reflection. In the beginning, everything feels almost too perfect, too synchronized to be real. They make you believe this is destiny, that the universe is finally compensating you for all the pain you've endured. They listen intently, remember the smallest details of your story, and use your pain to build an idealized image, a soul twin woven from the threads of your own memories. They mirror you with false empathy, with words that sound as if they were reading your mind, and you believe them. Because empaths always want to believe. They hold a deep conviction that people are inherently good, that with enough love, patience, and understanding, everything can be healed. But that very faith becomes the trap. While the empath loves with their soul, the narcissist loves with their ego. From the start, their relationship is a paradox. One seeks harmony, the other seeks control. One longs for connection, the other only wants reflection. In the early phase, that reflection feels intoxicating. The empath feels seen, understood, cherished, but in truth, they are in love with their own image, reflected through the eyes of another. Carl Jung called this phenomenon the projection of the inner ideal. We do not love the person. We love the image we see in them, the light we haven't yet recognized as our own. The empath sees in the narcissist a soul that needs saving, a wounded child craving love, and they forget that no one can be saved unless they desire to save themselves. Because of their innate healing instinct, empaths mistake chaos for depth, confusion for complexity, and the narcissist's fear of abandonment for tenderness. They feel chosen, special, the center of that small universe, at least for a while. But for the narcissist, the beginning phase is not love. It is idealization, a calculated tactic to secure emotional supply. They flood you with praise, promises, and gestures so grand they border on fantasy. They convince you that you are the one. But what they love is not you. It is the power of making you believe in that illusion. They see you as a mirror that reflects their worth. When you admire them, they feel alive. When you question them, they feel threatened. The relationship begins to swing like a pendulum, wild love followed by cold withdrawal. And the empath, in trying to understand and preserve the bond, sinks deeper into the illusion. They think, maybe he's just stressed, maybe she's scared, maybe I should be more patient. But the more patient they are, the more they lose themselves. What Jung called the infection of projection begins to take hold when one person dissolves their psychological boundaries and absorbs the other's darkness. The empath begins to carry emotions that aren't theirs. The narcissist's shame, rage, emptiness, and fear. They think they're helping, healing, but in truth they are carrying what was never theirs to bear. Love slowly turns into emotional dependency. They wait for the text, the glance, the smallest sign of approval to feel loved. This repetition awakens buried memories from childhood times when they had to read their parents' emotions to stay safe, to feel the room, in order to survive. Now they repeat that ritual in love, mistaking trauma for connection. And while they're trying to love the right way, they don't realize they're loving the wrong person. Meanwhile, the narcissist begins to drain their energy. They test boundaries, manipulate with silence, and make the empath feel guilty for having needs. Every time the empath tries to communicate, they are met with words like, "You're too sensitive." "That's not what I meant. You're imagining things." Slowly they start doubting their own emotions. This is the moment illusion turns into manipulation. Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." For the empath, that fate is the narcissist, the living embodiment of their own unhealed shadow. The fear of abandonment, the hunger for validation, the illusion that love can fix everything. That illusion makes them endure, sacrifice, and forgive over and over again, believing that true love must come with trials. They do not realize they are being forged in the fire of their own darkness, where every wound carries a lesson. The narcissist will change masks depending on your reaction. When you pull away, they become tender. When you trust, they grow cold. When you go silent, they panic and pull you back into the cycle. Each time you return, they feel powerful again, and you think you're giving them another chance. In truth, you are allowing your own shadow to keep ruling your life. This is the stage Jung called the fascination with the shadow, when we become addicted to the very thing that wounds us, because deep down we are still afraid to face the primal loneliness within. Empaths love deeply not because they are weak, but because they still hope. They believe that if they stay long enough, love deeply enough, the other person will finally see their worth. But narcissists don't want to be loved, they want to be worshipped. And while you're trying to prove your love, you unknowingly become the fuel they use to deny their own soul. The relationship turns into an invisible battlefield between light and shadow. The empath begins to feel hollow, muted, smaller, speaking less, feeling less, shrinking to fit the void the other left behind. They self-censor their emotions, trying not to cause trouble, until one day they no longer recognize themselves. That is when the soul begins to cry for rescue. When Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious," he was speaking of this moment, the moment the empath must confront their own illusion. They realize love cannot be an endless trade between hope and hurt. They realize no amount of love can change someone who doesn't want to change. And most importantly, they realize that kindness does not mean silent suffering. But this realization doesn't come overnight. It arrives after countless rounds of forgiveness, endless conversations that go nowhere, sleepless nights wondering, what went wrong? Eventually, they see that the narcissist did not come to destroy them, but to reveal where they were still fragile, where they lacked boundaries, where they didn't yet know how to say no. They understand that fate is not something that happens from the outside, but something unhealed within, and only when the illusion cracks can the light finally enter. Awakening is not a blissful moment, it's when everything you believed in collapses, and yet you remain standing. Amid the ruins of illusion, the empath begins to see themselves not as a savior, not as a victim, but as a soul learning to become sovereign. The illusion of love dissolves not to steal your faith, but to return your clarity, that true love never costs you your peace, that understanding never demands you to lose yourself, that an open heart does not mean a heart available for exploitation. And when they finally grasp this truth, they cross the first threshold of awakening, where love ceases to be an illusion and becomes the path back to the authentic self. Part 2. The collapse of the illusion. When the illusion dissolves, it does not fade quietly, it explodes. And the empath who once believed in the redemptive power of love now finds themselves standing in the ruins of what once felt sacred. Not because they are weak, but because they loved with everything they had. And when everything collapses, their soul doesn't just ache, it tears open. Yet within that tear begins something few people ever experience: the disintegration of the false self. Jung called this moment psychological fragmentation, the breaking apart of the old psychic structure, when everything that once made you feel safe no longer exists. The empath doesn't just lose the other person, they lose the image of themselves, reflected in that person's eyes, the savior, the chosen one, the special one. All those roles vanish at once, leaving behind a terrifying void where the ego once stood. This is the point where most empaths cannot comprehend what is happening. Why does the pain run so deep, even though they know that person was toxic? Why do they still feel as though a part of them has been taken, even when reason says it's over? The answer lies deeper in the soul, where separation is not just between two people, but between two streams of energy that once intertwined so completely that the line between me and you disappeared. During these days, the pain is not merely memory, it is unprocessed energy. The empath feels the other still lingering in their mind, in dreams, in the sudden flutter of the heart each morning, and they blame themselves. Why haven't I moved on? Why do I still feel them? But what they are experiencing is not weakness. It is the residual energetic cord, what Jung described as the connective threads of the collective unconscious linking two souls that once merged, even if only through illusion. In this phase, many empaths are caught between two poles, wanting to forget, yet fearing to forget, wanting to cut the tie, yet feeling guilty, because their love, though betrayed, was genuine. And that is the paradox of the empathic soul. They cannot stop loving simply because the other proved unworthy. They must learn to love without holding on. It is a new kind of love, not directed outward, but inward. But before that rebirth, they must pass through the collapse. When the empath withdraws or is discarded, the narcissist reacts. They cannot bear silence, for the empath's silence is proof that control has been lost. And so they return, not out of love, but to confirm that their power remains. They hoover, sending messages, feigning remorse, saying things designed to soften the empath's heart. They trigger beautiful memories, knowing precisely what awakens compassion in you. They might cry, apologize, say, "No one understands me like you do." But what they want is not you, it's your reaction. If the empath hasn't yet understood the nature of this game, they fall back into the familiar loop: forgiveness, hope, disappointment. Each cycle drains another fragment of their soul. The pain is no longer about losing the other, it's about losing themselves piece by piece. Yet it is in this very stage that the lesson of sovereignty begins. This is what Jung would call the dark night of the empathic soul, the death of the old self, so that the true self can be born. But that death is not gentle. It's a violent tearing between two realities, one toxic yet familiar, and another unknown one where you must stand alone with no reflection to affirm you. Here, the narcissist unleashes their final tactics: emotional manipulation, blame, shifting, and when those fail, triangulation, bringing others into the story to make you feel replaced, jealous, or inferior. They flaunt the new supply, drop hints about their supposed happiness, or let mutual contacts accidentally deliver information. The goal is not love, it is energetic control. To a narcissist, your emotions are fuel, the only thing that makes them feel real. When you are silent, they collapse. When you react, they revive. Every reply, every justification, every attempt to explain feeds them. At this stage, the empath must learn to endure the emptiness without rushing to fill it, to look at the manipulator without reacting, to exist in silence without seeking validation. This is their greatest test, for their nature is to feel, to respond, to heal. But Jung once said, "You cannot heal someone with what comforts them. You can only heal through truth." And the truth now is this: they don't need your love, they need your energy. When the empath realizes this, they begin to reclaim their power not through hatred, but through the end of unconditional giving. They understand that compassion does not require self-sacrifice. They begin to ask, if I love this person but lose myself, is that still love? And in that moment, a profound transformation begins. Blind love turns into conscious love. Compassion becomes discernment. And for the first time, the empath experiences silence not as loneliness, but as a sacred space to reconnect with the self. In truth, this collapse is the universe's final exam. It asks, are you ready to stop saving others and start saving yourself? Are you ready to stop reacting, explaining, proving your worth through endurance? Do you have the courage to face misunderstanding, distortion, isolation, and still remain at peace, refusing to play the game? If you pass this test, you cross the threshold of inner sovereignty. For the empath, this is also when they encounter the flying monkeys, those unknowingly manipulated by the narcissist to attack them indirectly. They may be mutual friends, relatives, even former supporters. This is when you are isolated, smeared, misunderstood. But here lies your greatest training, to discern truth from perception, reality from controlled narrative. Jung called this separation from the unconscious collective the moment you stop living by how others see you and begin living by what you truly know of yourself. When you no longer react, the narcissist becomes deeply unsettled. They will do anything to reopen your wounds, even feign weakness, illness, or emotional breakdown. They may claim regret, change, or say, I just want you to be happy. But remember, their remorse never comes from awareness, only from the fear of losing power. If you return, the cycle restarts. Idealization, manipulation, devaluation, discard, and each round cuts your soul deeper. The empath must understand that non-reaction is not numbness. Silence is not indifference. It is the highest form of spiritual power, the recognition that you no longer need external validation to feel whole. When you stop fighting to be understood, you begin to understand yourself. When you stop proving your love, you begin to truly love. That is when the first spark of awareness flickers through the long darkness. Carl Jung once said, there is no awakening without the dark night of the soul. That night is not a curse, it is a baptism. It washes away illusion, roles, and false beliefs about love and worth. It forces you to witness the raw truth that someone can say, I love you, and still have no capacity to love anyone. That sometimes the only way to save someone is to let them face their own consequences. And that love cannot redeem darkness if light is too afraid to shine upon it. After the collapse, the empath is no longer the same. They no longer seek intensity, they seek peace. They no longer crave to be understood. They long to be seen without explanation. And above all, they learn that true love does not come from lack, but from wholeness. From here they begin the journey of rebirth, where pain is no longer the enemy but the guide. Most of the world will never understand this. Only souls who have loved the wrong person and still dared to love again will know that in the ashes of a burned heart a seed of light remains. And that seed, one day, will blossom into freedom. Part 3. Reconstructing the soul. After the empath has walked through the wreckage, a chilling quiet settles over them. No more explosive pain, no more tears, only a strange emptiness, a silence they first mistake for void, but which is in fact the beginning of a new order. Jung calls this stage albedo the whitening of the soul after it has been fired in the black flames of Nigredo. And it is not gentle. Before being reborn, the empath must relearn how to exist in this world without relying on pain, without needing to be needed, without performing the role of healer. After leaving the narcissist, they do not become who they once were. The world looks different. Human noise, hollow words, half-hearted relationships, all of it makes them feel out of place. Many pass through a phase of existential disorientation. They no longer trust the old forms of love, no longer trust promises, sometimes even lose faith in their own intuition. They learn to slow down, to watch, to be silent. In that silence, they meet a stark truth. For years, they loved in order to be seen, but rarely ever truly saw themselves. Now the process of self-reconstruction begins. It doesn't arrive in one blinding moment, but in small daily acts, each decision not to go back, each boundary set, each no spoken without guilt. The empath learns to live without outsourcing their inner map to another person. They begin observing their emotions the way an alchemist watches reactions in a crucible, no fleeing, no labeling things good or bad, just seeing. And in that seeing, the soul slowly reassembles its original architecture: autonomy, clarity, and peace. One of the hardest lessons now is learning not to explain. Empaths are used to environments where they must constantly justify their intentions and extinguish misunderstandings. But they come to know that those who want to understand will understand, and those who need to distort will distort no matter what you say. So they choose silence, not the silence of fear, but of awareness. I no longer owe anyone an explanation for my healing. Meanwhile, the narcissist often keeps trying to touch back, not out of love, but out of emptiness. They try every tactic to trigger a reaction: engineered coincidences, messages through intermediaries, feigned weakness, or flaunting new supply to provoke. What they don't grasp is that the empath no longer operates on the same frequency. The empath has undergone a frequency shift. They are no longer a mirror, they are a lamp. And that light terrifies the narcissist, not because it hurts their eyes, but because it exposes a truth they dread. They were never as strong as they imagined. At a deeper level, this reconstruction is a dialogue with one's own shadow. The empath begins to see where the darkness once reigned, not as an enemy, but as a teacher. The very weakness that once invited harm becomes a doorway to wisdom. Feelings that once brought shame become a compass for detecting toxic energy. Compassion, once exploited, is now braided with discernment, compassion with discernment. Here they understand that healing is not the disappearance of pain, but living with it consciously. As the soul grows quiet, they remember simple things: the sound of rain, morning light, the smell of coffee, a deep breath. What used to be drowned in emotional chaos becomes sacred because these things ask nothing of them. They simply are. And within that being, they begin to understand true love, not born of fear of loss, but of gratitude for existence. In Jungian teaching, there is the transcendent function, the psyche's capacity to reconcile opposites and generate a new level of awareness. The empath now embodies that process. They reconcile light and shadow, compassion and limits, loving and letting go, past and present. No more extremes, no need to win. They no longer require the other to admit fault to feel justice. They realize true justice is not the other's penalty, but one's own inner freedom. Strangely, once they reach this state, the universe begins to rearrange. New people appear quiet, undramatic, promise. Light yet truth. Dense who share a compatible frequency. They speak little, but they are real. They don't show up to make you happy, but to share the happiness already present. The empath sees that when you heal, you stop being attractive in the old way, you become still, and only those with real depth can find you. Symbolically, this is the bloom after ash. No fireworks, no miracles, just a person sitting calmly in the middle of life, needing to defeat no one, to prove nothing, to be understood by no one. They have seen every face of love, beautiful, ruthless, transforming, and are no longer afraid of it. They understand that to love without awareness is to surrender yourself. To love with awareness is the most sacred act. From here, they live differently. They work slower, speak less, but every action is intentional. They no longer look for someone to fill a gap, because they know the gap does not need filling, it needs keeping, like a sacred space awaiting what is worthy. The empath is truly reborn when they no longer need to be understood, only to be themselves. If this stage had one sentence, it would be, I'm no longer searching for love. I am love. Not a floaty sentiment, but love with boundaries, with wisdom, with the quiet of someone who has seen both heaven and hell. They have walked through both, and now they simply smile, knowing nothing outside can collapse them again. This is rebirth in silence, the empaths return to their original energy, whole, independent, and clear-sighted. And it is here that the universe places the greatest reward in their hands, a peace no narcissist can ever touch. Part 4. The sole purpose of the empath. After walking through the ruins, the empath begins to realize pain never came to punish, it came to awaken. A special kind of silence arises after the storm, not the emptiness of loss, but the calm of someone who has seen the true nature of things. In that serenity, they begin to understand something their heart was once too fragile to grasp, that the relationship with the narcissist was not a mistake, but a sacred initiation of the soul. Jung once said, "No one becomes enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And that painful love was the very instrument that forced the empath to face the deepest darkness, not only in another, but within themselves. That darkness took the form of old beliefs. I only have value when others need me. I must forgive to be loved. If I'm good enough, they will change. When these beliefs crumble, the empath awakens to a greater truth. They were never meant to be the mirror for someone else's pain, but the light that illuminates it. This is when they begin to understand their dharma, the soul's destined path. Not the path of saving others, but the path of awareness, of keeping the heart open while maintaining boundaries, of being present without dissolving into others. They start to look back at their entire journey with new eyes. Every wound, every failure, every betrayal was spiritual training. The encounter with the narcissist did not destroy them. It refined them into carriers of consciousness, those who understand the mechanics of darkness, not through theory, but through direct experience of the soul. During this phase, a quiet transformation unfolds. The empath no longer feels the need to prove their healing by appearing strong or over it. They begin to live differently, no longer reactive, no longer drawn into emotionally addictive relationships. They choose silence, solitude, and meaningful work. They embrace solitude, not as punishment, but as a sacred space for reconnection with their true essence. As they go deeper into this inner pilgrimage, a new realization emerges. If I can feel others' pain so deeply, perhaps I was not born to escape it, but to transmute it. But they now understand the difference between transmutation and salvation. Transmutation is inner alchemy. Salvation is an external illusion. The empath learns to transform heavy energy into clarity. When they sense another's pain, they do not absorb it, they witness it. When they see manipulation, they do not judge, they discern. When they face darkness, they do not fear, because they have already walked through it and returned whole. This is the essence of the awakened healer, no longer healing anyone, but simply being. They understand that their energy itself is the most refined instrument. When they are peaceful, their environment begins to change. They do not preach, yet their presence mirrors truth. They do not claim wisdom, they are wisdom. In everyday life, this manifests as quiet but profound shifts. The empath begins choosing work aligned with their values, no longer driven by approval. They choose friends based on energy, not status. They sense who comes to them for genuine connection and who comes out of need. And instead of resenting, they smile because they understand that every soul is on its own timeline of awakening. The Dharma of the empath does not lie in becoming someone great, but in living authentically, being fully present, and radiating awareness through their very existence. They no longer need to explain, because they have become the living lesson. Those who meet them feel something different, not charisma, but peace. And that peace is the mark of a soul that has transcended the emotional games of the world and now stands on the other shore where love and understanding are no longer separate. The empath now sees that pain is no longer the enemy, it is the language of the soul. Every time their heart broke, light entered. Every person who hurt them was in truth a hidden teacher, forcing them to evolve. Thus, resentment dissolves not because they forget, but because they understand. They see that every soul is simply playing its part in the grand drama of human consciousness evolving. One day, the empath looks back and realizes they no longer want to be loved the way they once did. They no longer need to be chosen because they have chosen themselves. They no longer crave a great love to prove their worth because they have become that love. And precisely when they stop searching, true love appears not to rescue but to walk beside. No one owns, no one saves. Two souls meet not from lack but from wholeness. Jung once wrote, "The purpose of life is not happiness, but awareness." And when the empath reaches that awareness, happiness flows naturally like breath, not the ecstatic kind, but the quiet joy of a soul in harmony with itself. They no longer seek light, they are light. And they begin to walk the world, not avoiding darkness, but carrying a lamp, the very light once forged from their pain. From here, the empath enters a new stage of the journey, not as a victim, nor merely a survivor, but as a guide. They do not preach or force awakening, but through their very presence they awaken remembrance in others, the memory of what they already are. Light that has momentarily forgotten itself. And perhaps that is the true dharma of the empath, not to heal the world, but to become the mirror through which the world heals itself. Part 5. The Sacred Union. When the empath meets the right one, after becoming whole. There is a subtle paradox in the empath's journey. They only meet true love after learning how to live without needing it. Not because the universe wants to punish them, but because real love cannot be found through lack. It only appears in the space of wholeness where two souls meet, not to fill each other, but to reflect each other's light. After years of heartbreak and awakening, the empath no longer sees love through the same eyes. They are no longer drawn to emotional storms or confuse obsession with connection, familiarity with destiny. They understand now that the warmth of a relationship lies not in its intensity, but in the depth of safety it provides. And so they begin to sense the presence of another, not someone perfect, but someone who, like them, has walked through their own shadows. This person doesn't arrive with drama or fireworks. They don't make the empath's heart race in panic, they make their soul exhale. The meeting is light as air, but deep as the sea. Here, no one has to pretend to be strong or wise. They speak little and listen deeply. There is no rush to define the relationship, for they both know that real love doesn't need a label, it is simply recognized. For the first time, the empath loves without losing themselves. They don't have to explain their feelings, prove their goodness, or fix anyone. They allow the other to be, and they themselves are allowed to be. Both carry scars, yet neither uses them as walls. Instead, they use those scars as maps, guides toward understanding. Carl Jung once said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." And indeed, when the empath meets the one who is truly worthy, no one owns the other, both are transformed. The other person doesn't arrive to complete them, but to co-create something greater than love itself, the sacred union of two awakened souls. The difference is clear. In this new relationship, there is no power struggle. No one needs to win because both want to understand. No one uses silence as punishment, because both know that silence only holds meaning when it is a space for peace, not a weapon of manipulation. If conflict arises, they pause, breathe, and look for the root, not for who's right, but for what needs to be healed. After being exploited so many times for their empathy, the empath now practices compassion with wisdom. They love with awareness, not giving to be chosen, but sharing because they are already full. Their love is no longer an addiction, but a steady, nourishing current. They no longer crave intensity because they understand that peace is the highest form of passion. The other, what we might call a resonant soul, has also walked through their own darkness. They have not come to be healed, but to practice conscious love together. Between them, there are no grand promises, only a silent vow. We will stand here together, facing both the light and the shadow without running away. In this space, the empath finally understands what conscious love truly means. It is not about finding someone who makes you happy, but meeting someone willing to take responsibility for that happiness alongside you. They no longer say, "You hurt me," but ask, "What is this pain trying to teach us?" They no longer try to heal each other, but become safe places for each to heal themselves. This sacred union does not unfold on the emotional stage, it unfolds in the stillness of consciousness. Two souls, once shattered now, merge not through promises, but through presence. When they look into each other's eyes, there is no hunger to possess, only the recognition. I know you. I have seen you before in my own pain. And in that moment, love ceases to be a story between two people. It becomes a field of energy, a fusion of light and shadow where both are free. In this love, the empath no longer fears abandonment, because they know that separation cannot exist between two souls that have truly met. Life may change, time may pass, but the bond remains not in form, but in consciousness. For true love does not need to stay to exist. It only needs to be lived authentically. When maturity arrives, the empath realizes love is no longer a reward. It is the reflection of their own level of awareness. Once they attracted pain because pain was the teacher they needed. Now they attract peace because they have become peace. And perhaps that is the deepest law of the soul. You can only meet someone vibrating at the same frequency as your heart. Finally, they understand that the sacred union is not only the merging with another, but the harmony between the two poles within oneself, between light and shadow, love and wisdom, heart and mind. When that inner union is achieved, the outer world merely mirrors what has already become whole inside. The love the empath finds in the end is not a reward for suffering, but the fruit of awakening. A love that doesn't need to win, to prove, or to strive. A love where presence is enough. And in that presence, they smile not because they have finally found someone, but because they have finally become the one they were always searching for. Part 6. The Mirror of the Divine. There is something the empath only understands when they have reached the very end of love and pain. That love, in its truest form, was never merely a story between two people. It is a soul's journey, a sacred rite through which God, or the universe, or infinite consciousness itself, gazes into a mirror to see its own reflection. When two mature souls meet, they no longer love to possess, they love to reflect the divinity within each other. At this stage, the empath realizes that love is no longer an emotion, but a state of consciousness. It does not depend on presence or absence, nor waver with words or actions. Love becomes a space where both souls can expand, evolve, and look deeper into their own being. If once they loved in order to be seen, now they love in order to see more clearly. Carl Jung once said, "Through every relationship, the self seeks to know itself." And now, the empath understands that not through intellect, but through experience. When they look at their beloved, they no longer see a lover, but a living mirror reflecting the deepest parts of themselves, the light and the shadow alike. They no longer fear the darkness in the other, because they have embraced the darkness within. And because of that, they can see the true light inside the other, not the light of perfection, but the light of authenticity. Love at this level is no longer sweet in the old sense. It is deep, still, and at times terrifying because it demands absolute honesty. In this mirror, no one can hide. Both see clearly the old habits, the fears, the unhealed wounds. Yet instead of running or blaming, they use love as a tool of illumination. Every conflict is no longer a battle, but an opportunity for consciousness to expand. Every moment of weakness is no longer failure, but an invitation from the soul. Stay, look deeper, understand instead of react. The empath no longer seeks the feeling of being loved, for they have realized that their very presence in love is the most sacred act of all. They know that love is a creative force. Each touch, each glance, each silence holds the power to transform space itself. They have learned the art of conscious loving, to love without attachment, to care without control, to empathize without dissolving. Sacred union now transforms into the mirror of the divine, a realm where both become instruments through which the divine reflects itself. They realize they're not just loving a human being, but the divine essence within that person, the fragment of eternal light that has always been, is, and will forever be. And so every shared moment, every meal, conversation, smile, or silence becomes sacred, for in it they are worshipping life itself. The empath understands that true love does not need to be protected by fear, but sustained through awareness. They no longer cling, because they know what is real will never leave. They no longer possess, because they understand that nothing in the universe ever truly belongs to anyone. They simply continue to be here with an open heart, a lucid mind, and reverence for the soul beside them. At this level, love no longer stops at two people, it radiates outward as healing energy. They begin to notice everything around them shifting. Work feels lighter, relationships become more authentic, others feel mirrored simply by being in their presence. They have become a channel of light not because they strive to, but because they are. In solitude, the empath senses their partner's presence as a quiet current of energy, not dependency but harmony. They feel the connection not only in mind or heart, but at the level of the soul. They know this bond transcends time, space, and form, a resonance understood only by those who have walked through the dark night and returned whole. And one day, they look back on their path from wounding, loss, awakening to union, and realize everything that once broke them was preparing them for this moment. Without darkness, they would never have learned to protect the light. Without fragmentation, they would never have known wholeness. Without the one who hurt them, they would never have become someone who truly knows how to love. This is when love transcends narrative. It becomes a current of divine consciousness flowing through them, as if the universe itself were breathing through two human forms. They understand that their task is not to keep this love forever, but to live it fully in each moment. At this level, love no longer fears endings, because the empath knows that endings are only another form of transformation. And if one day these two souls must part ways, they will smile because they know that what is sacred never disappears. It merely changes form to continue expanding. Thus the empath, once shattered by love, once doubting their own heart, now walks through the world with their heart wide open, yet no longer waiting for anyone to heal them. They no longer seek love, because they have become love. Their love has become a silent prayer. May everyone I meet feel closer to themselves. It is a love unbound by names, limits, or fear, a love that has transmuted into awareness, that has risen beyond human tragedy to become the echo of the divine. For, in the end, every journey is only one journey, the journey of love recognizing itself. Part 7. The Radiance. When the empath becomes a light for the world. After the long journey of breaking, awakening, and union, the empath enters the final stage, not a learner anymore, but a beacon. Their light is not a showy blaze. It is warm, diffused, and awakening. They don't speak much, yet their presence makes others feel safe enough to remove their masks. They don't try to change the world, but by the way they live, the world around them begins to change. At this stage, the empath's energy carries the quality of tempered radiance light that has been washed in darkness and learned not to glare, only to illumine. The empath now understands that light doesn't need to defeat darkness. It only needs to be present, and darkness dissolves on its own. They no longer try to spread positivity as a movement. They simply live truthfully, calmly. Every word, every action, every choice arises from awareness rather than reaction. When someone reaches this level of consciousness, they become a stable field where others feel rebalanced without knowing why. The empath who once carried pain as a burden now carries it as a seal, a testament that they walked a road few dare to take. When they see someone caught in the trap of manipulation, they don't judge or command leave, but plant a single question. What do you think you're trading away to keep this person? They plant awareness, not fear. In their work, they no longer chase fame or recognition, because they know true value needs no proof. They choose to create what is meaningful, what has soul. They bring compassion into action and honesty into every relationship. They learn to say no as a ritual to protect their energy, and to say yes as a sacred act reserved for what is worthy. The empath has stepped out of the role of healer and become a bearer of light, not saving anyone, only lighting the way. And then they realize something profound. Light is not only for shining outward, it is also for keeping oneself from getting lost. For the further one evolves, the subtler the temptations, reputation, power. The role of master can rouse the ego in new ways. But they remember, there is, in truth, no one who needs to be led, only those who have forgotten they are light. So the empath lives humbly, simply, no longer seduced by spiritual packaging, but faithful to the raw truth of life. They help others not with florid words, but with conscious presence. They sit beside the one who cries without trying to stop the tears. They listen to another's fear without trying to fix it. They know that sometimes silence is the deepest therapy. They understand that people don't need to be healed. They need to be seen without judgment. And because they themselves were seen by God in their weakest moment, they know how to look at others with the same eyes. At a deeper level, the empath begins to sense themselves as part of a collective lattice of light. Each time they live authentically, they feed energy to thousands of souls struggling with the same story. Jung spoke of the collective unconscious. Fewer speak of collective awakening. The empath is the cell that catalyzes that process. Every time they choose honesty over pretense, forgiveness over hatred, stillness over reaction, a small part of the world grows brighter. From here, they no longer ask, how do we make the world less toxic? But, can I become a safe space for this world? And the answer is yes, through their very being. Not through campaigns, not through slogans, but by being human, most real, most lucid, most kind. When an empath reaches this stage, they live like water, quiet but powerful. They can work among the unconscious without being drained, because they can discern what is theirs and what is not. They enter a room, and the energy shifts not because they try, but because their peace is strong enough to regulate the field around them. They no longer need to become someone, because they have returned to being themselves, and that very naturalness sets them apart. When others ask, how can you be so calm? They smile. I once lost everything and discovered that peace is the one thing that cannot be taken. At the end of the journey, the empath is no longer defined by what they do, but by the quality of energy they carry. They may be a creator, a teacher, a mother, a friend, a hermit. The form no longer matters. Wherever they are a small ember of light radiating awareness. The outer world may remain chaotic, manipulative, and unawake, but the empath no longer feels victimized by it. They are a witness, and more than that, a keeper of the flame. They understand that light's job is not to banish darkness, but simply to keep burning. For with even one small light, darkness is no longer absolute. And that is the empath's final mission, not to change the world by force, but by presence, a quiet presence that cannot be denied. A presence that makes others believe there is another way to live, to love, to exist authentic, clear, requiring no victories, no new persona. Because in the end, what the empath learns is not how to love, but how to be present. And it is that presence uncontrolling, unforced, unafraid that makes darkness tremble and helps the world remember its own true light. They no longer say, I overcame. They simply say, I am still here, and I am shining. Part 8. The eternal flame, the everlasting light within the awakened soul. In the end, every journey leads to one place, home within. The empath has moved through the circle of darkness and light, has loved, lost, awakened, and shown. But when all those chapters close, they realize what they sought was never outside. It was always there, an eternal flame glowing in the soul, waiting for them to return and discover they were never separated from the source. Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And that is precisely what the empath has done. They did not flee suffering. They walked through it. They gazed into the abyss and did not fall, and because of that they became a candle that does not go out in humanity's long night. Now the flame no longer burns from anguish or longing. It is still, steady, and bright. It is not a fire that demands to be seen, but a flame that knows it is guiding the way. The empath needs no recognition, no crowd, no titles like healer or awakened. They only need to live truthfully because they know truth itself is light. That flame, in the language of alchemy, is the final phase of rubedo, the crystallization after dissolution, nigredo, and purification, albedo. Now there is no separation between the lover and the beloved, between light and shadow, between human and divine. All is reconciled in the awareness, life and I are one. In that union, everything feels different. The wind, the rain, the passerby's smile, each becomes a message from the universe. Not because they spiritualize life, but because they perceive the sacred that was always there in every moment. Sadness is no longer terrifying, solitude no longer empty, and even silence becomes full. The empath realizes true light is not the opposite of darkness. It embraces darkness. For without darkness, light wouldn't know what it illuminates. Deep down, darkness is simply light not yet recognized. And that is when they stop fighting life. Instead of trying to maintain positive energy, they live like a natural flow, letting the inner light blend with the outer light until there is no boundary. From here, their existence becomes symbolic rather than personal. They are no longer I, but we. Every small act becomes part of a collective consciousness in evolution. They do not need to help everyone, because they understand that one truly awakened person already transmits that energy through the whole web of humanity. They are living proof of this truth. Light doesn't need to win, it only needs to be. Sometimes the empath looks back at those who hurt them, at the breakups, at the exhausted years, and smiles, not because they forgot, but because they understand. They know that without those souls they would never have met themselves. Without being burned by the fire of pain, they would never have known how brightly they could shine. Everything that once made them fall now forms the light they carry. At this stage, the empath no longer practices healing. They live healing. They no longer inspire. They are inspiration. They no longer preach love. They are love. They do not try to spread light. They are light, self-diffusing. Their presence, their peace, their authenticity is enough to awaken the sacred memory in other souls. This is no longer the story of empath and narcissist, no longer the story of wounding and recovery. This is the story of consciousness outgrowing its own limits. The empath understands that the play between light and shadow is only one act of the cosmic drama, and when they have learned their part, they stand, bow, and step off the stage, not with pride, but with deep gratitude. For now, they no longer want to be loved. They want to be love. No longer want to be saved. They want to be the hand that lifts others from illusion. No longer want to be seen. They want to be the mirror that reflects truth. And so they go gently, quietly, without fanfare, without trace. They live in the world, yet are no longer of it. They may be teaching, creating, cooking, or simply sitting by the window watching the rain. And somewhere, other souls feel their presence as if the air itself has become easier to breathe. In the end, the empath becomes a conduit between the visible and the invisible, between the human and the divine. They are the evidence that pain does not destroy the soul, it makes it transparent. And through that transparency, the eternal light of God can shine. From here, they no longer say, I have awakened. They simply say, I have come home. And in that homecoming, They received the deepest lesson this journey was trying to teach, that love never leaves us, for we are love. Part 9, Epilogue. The circle returns to light. When every story has been told, every tear has fallen, and every lesson has soaked deep into the soul, the empath realizes that this journey was never a straight line, it was a circle. A circle that began in innocence, passed through pain, walked through darkness, and returned to the light, only this time the light is no longer outside but within. Once they believed light was something to be found. They chased it in someone's eyes, in promises, in moments that felt destined, but that light always faded. Now they understand. True light is never found because it was never lost. It was only hidden beneath fear, expectation, and the layers of masks worn to be loved. When the empath looks back, they no longer see enemies, but sacred teachers of the soul. Every betrayer was a mirror revealing what they had not yet seen. Every wound was a ritual of transformation. Every heartbreak was a doorway to deeper awareness. And they understand no one ever truly had the power to destroy them. Only they did if they chose to forget who they are. Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." The empath has walked through hell to reclaim that privilege. They no longer seek apologies from the past, justice from others, or understanding from those who never could. They understand now, and that understanding, not as knowledge but as deep peace, is the very light they had been searching for all along. Now they move through the world as ordinary people, yet carry a sacred secret in their hearts, that life has never been against them. It only played the antagonist so they could recognize their own light. They no longer resent or resist. Everything becomes right, even the mistakes. Everything becomes perfect, even the imperfections. And when they look at others, they no longer see the manipulator, the victim, or the cruel. They see souls learning to remember themselves just as they once did. They see themselves in every gaze, every fear, every misplaced word. And so, judgment dissolves. What remains is conscious love, a quiet, unromantic love that simply understands every soul is finding its way home. When the circle returns to its beginning, it is no longer repetition, it is expansion, because the one who returns is not the one who left. This being now carries both light and shadow in their heart, knows how to love without losing, how to let go without resentment, how to live without performance. They become a living symbol of integration where angel and shadow shake hands, where human and divine merge into one. The empath no longer searches for a life purpose because they realize life itself is the purpose. Every breath is a prayer, every smile a ritual of gratitude, every lingering ache an invitation to open the heart a little wider. They no longer ask, "Who am I?" but "How can I love more deeply?" And that is the question their soul will carry through lifetimes. Perhaps this is what the universe meant when it sent them the narcissist, that through those who cannot love, they would learn unconditional love. Through those who fear the light, they would learn to guard it. And through their breaking, they would return to the unbreakable essence of their soul. Now, when night falls, they no longer fear the dark. They know that in the dark, their own light shines most clearly. They sit still, feel their heart beat slowly, sense their breath, and realize that everything, every person, every memory, every pain rests within the embrace of life itself, where nothing needs to be forgiven, only understood. And so they smile. Not the smile of victory, but the smile of a soul that has come home. A small, quiet smile, yet one that makes the universe tremble, because at last there is no empath and no narcissist. No victim and no villain. No story left to tell. Only light. Only love. Only presence. And there the circle closes and begins again as a new ring of light. There was a time when the empath believed their journey ended once they had forgiven the one who hurt them. But forgiveness was only the first doorway, one that led into a deeper labyrinth, where they no longer faced another person, but the part of their own soul that had chosen to enter this game. For every soul, whether saintly or lost, seeks the same thing, the return to its true essence. And sometimes that return must pass through betrayal, loss, and darkness, so deep it feels as though even God has abandoned us. Jung once said, "We do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." When the empath dares to look at the wound without rushing to heal it, when they stay with the pain without fleeing, something miraculous happens. The pain begins to dissolve into awareness, and awareness becomes light. Not a blinding light, but a soft, steady, weighty light, the light of understanding. Eventually, the empath understands that the goal is not to stop hurting, but to stop fearing pain. Because fear of pain is the root of all control, and control is the root of all suffering. From that moment on, they stop trying to define happiness, stop forcing themselves to be positive, stop chasing the commercialized image of healing. They quietly accept the duality of being human, that one can be peaceful and still wounded, can love and still know that love may end, can trust in life even without fully understanding its meaning. This is the state of a mature soul where one no longer needs answers, because the question itself has become sacred. At a deeper level, the empath realizes that the narcissist was never truly someone else. He was a part of them, the part that feared pain so much it wore a mask of perfection, the part that sought control to avoid feeling powerless again. Seeing this softens their heart. No more blame, only quiet understanding. I, too, have been them in another time. And in that moment, they step out of the cycle of victim and perpetrator, not through forgiveness, but through integration. From here, they live without roles. Not the healer, not the victim, not the ever-gentle one who always understands. They become whole, able to say no when needed, to laugh at themselves, to let go without resentment. They no longer wish to become the light, for they now know that true light has no intention of becoming anything it simply is. And so, they begin to see the world with new eyes. What once enraged them now only evokes compassion. The endless wars of right and wrong, light and dark, now appear like children arguing in the playground of the cosmos. They no longer need to win, to prove, or to explain. The stillness within them makes all outer noise seem small. In truth, awakening is not about reaching perfection or omniscience. It is simply beginning to see the world as it is without the lens of woundedness. When they no longer view life through the thirst to be loved, they begin to see love everywhere, in every breath, in light filtering through leaves, in the eyes of strangers, even in the silence of those who once left them. One day, they will meet another soul, not a missing half, but a frequency match. They do not find each other to complete one another, but to expand consciousness together. In their eyes, there is no need, only recognition. I see you. I see myself in you. Oh, this is the sacred union that mystics and philosophers spoke of, the union of two souls who no longer seek, but simply share the overflow of love. Yet, even if no one arrives, the empath still feels full, because they know love is no longer something that happens between two people, but a state of being. When we are truly present, everything we touch becomes part of love. They love the trees, the sounds, the sorrow, even death itself, for to them, everything is just another form of the same living energy, life itself. At a deeper level, they realize that the universe is not a stage for human drama, but a classroom for souls. And every soul, no matter its role, is learning the same lesson, to remember it is light. Some learn through loving, some through hurting, some through loss, some through forgiveness. There is no good or bad, only souls in different classrooms. Understanding this, they stop judging, stop dividing. They look upon the world with awakened compassion, a compassion that doesn't weaken them, but makes them strong through acceptance. Finally, the empath realizes that healing is not a destination, but a way of living. It is not about eliminating suffering, but learning to dance with it. Just as waves cannot be separated from the ocean, pain cannot be separated from life. When they stop fighting the waves, they become the ocean itself. And in that ocean, There is no separation between me and them, between past and present. Everything merges into the single breath of the cosmos. From here, their life becomes profoundly simple. They need no grand purpose, no mission, no proof of worth. They simply live with complete presence. They drink water and feel its coolness travel down their throat. They walk and know the earth is holding them. They smile and know the universe smiles too. Each moment becomes a ceremony not for its form, but because their awareness has become a prayer. When they meet someone in pain, they no longer try to heal. They simply sit beside them, listen, and let their presence speak, because they know it is not advice but inner peace that touches another's soul. Sometimes the old darkness returns as a memory, a dream, or a sudden feeling. But now they are no longer afraid. They smile and whisper, "Thank you for reminding me that I can still feel." They welcome the darkness like an old friend, for they know every return of darkness only strengthens the light. At this point, the empath has become an invisible teacher of the world. They do not preach, they wear no titles. Their presence, their way of living, their silence is the teaching, and those still asleep will naturally awaken when touched by that energy like seeds watered at night, rising quietly without knowing why. At last they understand every pain came not to destroy, but to expand. Every loss came not to take away, but to return them to themselves. Every ending came not to close, but to open a new layer of consciousness where love is no longer an object, but the space surrounding everything. The empath looks up at the night sky where stars burn, not for anyone, not for any reason, and they understand they are the same. They need no audience, no validation. They only need to keep shining quietly, steadily, truthfully. For true light never needs spectators. It only needs to be faithful to its nature. And perhaps that is what this entire journey from love to pain to awakening to wholeness was trying to teach all along. That we were never born to win or lose, to hold or to let go, but to experience what it means to be ourselves, whole, fearless, and undivided. When the empath understands this, all questions dissolve, leaving only a silent knowing that they have loved, that they have hurt, that they have fallen to the deepest depths and still chosen to rise, and that more than happiness, more than a beautiful ending, is the true proof of awakening. They close the old book, not because they have forgotten, but because they have understood. They smile, step forward, and do not look back. Ahead lies no heaven waiting, no hell threatening, only life unfolding, vast, transparent, infinite, and in every breath they whisper a final prayer. I understand now. I no longer seek. I only wish to be present and to love as light has always loved the dark,